Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 11th of June of 2023. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. The most important, as usually, are coming from Orechov Bridgehead or Bradley Square and from Vremivka Tactical Bridgehead. First, let's start with the Orechov Bridgehead with Bradley Square, and the Russians reported that during the previous 24 hours they managed to repel the Ukrainian attacks that took place in the vicinity of Novodanilovka on the south of that area. Also, the Ukrainians made few attempts to attack in direction of Novopokrovka and in direction of Verbovka, Novofedorovka. All those attacks were repelled by the Russians, but those were Reco in combats or something like this, but not even Reco in force. Furthermore, the Russians today published another video of fierce fightings in the vicinity of Lapkova, the settlement. They published a video how the Ukrainians were trying to make a storming operation in that area. This is a very interesting settlement because the Russians are saying that nobody controls this settlement because this settlement is in the gray zone, but the Ukrainians are saying that they managed to capture this settlement and currently they have established control. But to tell the truth, I think that from this perspective, I know for sure that this settlement is not under Russian control for sure, but I'm not sure that the Ukrainians answered. Probably they did establish some kind of fire control, artillery control over that settlement. Probably they are able to send some commandos, scouts in that area, and probably they have some positions inside of some buildings and so on. But I'm not sure that the Ukrainians had their positions like trenches, fortifications, or something like this. This settlement located in the lowland, as you can see, the Russians can control either the Ukrainians as well. So probably this settlement is in the gray zone. Nothing special. Furthermore, the Russians reported that during the clashes for this settlement, the Ukrainians tried to send some reserves from Lukyanovska along the roads in direction of Lapkova, and the Ukrainians were trying to send the forces of 128th Mountain Assault Brigade, but the Russians managed to discover and they destroyed the convoys along the road between Stepnogorsk and Lukyansk. The Russians haven't published any video and photo confirmation of that, but maybe in the next few days we're going to see some updates about that event. Also, the Russians reported that during the day they discovered and destroyed the communication center of 65th Mechanized Brigade in the vicinity of Tavriska. This is the 67th Mechanized Brigade, and this is the main brigade that were involved in offensive operation in direction of Rabotina during the previous days. Furthermore, the Russians destroyed the headquarters of 47th. This is the 47th Mechanized Brigade, and mainly that brigade was involved in attacks in direction of Verbova that were repulsed during the previous days. And the Russians reported that they destroyed the operational center of 15th Brigade, and 15th Brigade, based on the deployment map, is located in the vicinity of Stepnogorsk. Probably a few squads were moved there, and the Russians discovered their operational center and destroyed that center as a result of artillery attack. Furthermore, the Russians made a small video like instruction for the Russian forces showing how it's better to make demining process. As you can see, the Russians made a small note that saying that if you see that the territory was mined by the Ukrainian forces, you shouldn't get closer than 80 meters to the mines, and you need to try to destroy those mines using the rifle or just bullets, but not to take in your hands, because this is NATO mines that can blow even if the mine spotted a metal in a very close to this mine. So that was a small update from the Russian side. Furthermore, the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation reported that the entire losses of the Ukrainians during the previous 24 hours were around 50 soldiers, 11 tanks including 3 Leopards, 33 personal armored carriers, and 4 light vehicles. As you can see, this is the lowest level of losses since the beginning of the storming operation, and probably this level of losses was connected with the prisoner exchange process. The Russians have returned 94 soldiers from the Ukrainian territory, and the Ukrainians managed to return 95 soldiers, and the exchange process took place in the vicinity of Kamyanska. So as I understand, During the previous weeks, as a result of fierce fightings, a lot of Russians were captured by the Ukrainians, a lot of Ukrainians were captured by the Russians, and currently, let's say, at the end of the first week or of these fightings for Orechov, for Bradley Square, they take a decision to make exchange process and to return soldiers to each other. So probably that was the reason of no activities on this front line, and that was the reason of such a low level of losses from the Ukrainian side. Now we're moving further and we're getting to the Vremivka tactical bridgehead, as you can see, and there is like three icons of the white flag on the blue like background, saying that the Ukrainians, as a result of some operations, managed to capture settlements like Niskuchne, Blagodatne and Livadne. Why I'm saying operation, because I must say that we need to understand the difference between the clashes during the previous days and the situation that took place on the Vremivka tactical bridgehead during the previous 24 hours. One more time, the Ministry of Defense reported that as a result of fierce fightings, the level of Ukrainian losses were just 50 soldiers. So this is the lowest level, but basically we see that as a result of some operation, the Ukrainians got control over those three settlements. From the other side, the Russians reported that during the previous 24 hours, they attacked positions of Ukrainian forces in the vicinity of Novodonetska, Blagodatne, Starozhovo, Niskuchne, and Urozhaine. And what exactly did happen during the previous 24 hours? I'll try to explain to you. The Russians made one of the very important notes in the report that explain the entire situation in this area. If you remember, starting from the beginning of the of the storming of this area, the Ukrainians were using the forces of 37th Marine Brigade that were attacking in the direction of Novodonetsk and were trying to establish control over this settlement. From the north, the forces of 31st Mechanized Brigade were attacking in the direction of Niskuchne, Blagodatne, Starozhovo and the Hill 178.2. And on the western flank, there were forces of 23rd Mechanized Brigade who were attacking the Russians in Novodanilovka and Livadne. And we saw a lot of video and photo confirmations how those brigades were defeated. They had a lot of losses and they left most of the settlements and the territories that were captured during that offensive operation. And today the Ministry of Defense reported that during the day they attacked positions of 1st Presidential Brigade, 110th Defense Brigade, 72nd Mechanized Brigade, and 1st Tank Brigades. So basically, those settlements that today we saw that Ukrainians captured was captured not by the newly created brigades by Western countries. Those settlement was captured by, let's say, veterans and with the soldiers with very old brigades who've been fighting with the Russians since the beginning of the special military operation. 110th Brigade is located in Gulay Pole, so probably the forces of that brigade entered Livadne. When talking about the northern flank, we see the note about of 1st Presidential Brigade, 72nd and 1st Tank Brigade. This is the 1st Tank Brigade. Probably the forces of that brigade managed to create a bridgehead, operational bridgehead between Blagodatne and Novodonetsk. I'm talking about this operational bridgehead that Ukrainians probably will try to develop within the next few days, and they will try to continue advancing to the south. Furthermore, the Russians were saying about 72nd Mechanized Brigade. This is 72nd. That the main positions of that brigade is in the vicinity of Vuglidar, and that experienced Mechanized Brigade is the brigade who managed to repel the Russian offensive operation that took place in January and February. So that was this is a very experienced brigade to be more precise. And the Russians were saying about the 1st Presidential Brigade, and based on the Western deployment map, this brigade is located in the vicinity of New York, this one. So probably, as you can see, the Ukrainians, after failed attacks with the newly created by the NATO forces brigades, took a decision to relocate old experienced brigade, and this operation was made by those forces. But anyway, I believe that the Russian intelligence managed to discover all these relocations, all these redeployments, and probably based on that and because of that, they took a decision not to give a battle in these settlements, and basically the Russians retreated from Niskuchne and Blagodatne without even the fightings. And the Ukrainians, these brigades captured these settlements without even a single shot, as people say from the ground, from from this situation, from this area. And this is very interesting, like replacements and relocations. And it's very interesting what the Ukrainians are going to do tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, whether they're going to continue attacking in this area using the old brigades like 72nd, 59th, 110th, 1st Tank brigades, or they will continue using the newly created brigade by the NATO countries with Leopards, with Bradleys, with Strikers, with Challengers, and so on. Very interesting. And basically, maybe the Russians wanted to send a message trying to show that the old Ukrainian brigades is much more powerful and much more better than the newly created brigades by the Western countries. So probably that was the message, and this is the situation in this area. Anyway, currently, as we can see, the Ukrainians captured Niskushne, Blagodatne, the settlements, let's say, in this area, and basically this gives the Ukrainians opportunity to continue advancing in direction of Urozhaine across the fields. This gives the Ukrainians possibilities to continue advancing in direction of Novodonetsk, and probably this settlement is going to fall, and of course to start another demining process in direction of Kremenchuk. So these three settlements is currently under Russian-Ukrainian observation, and probably these settlements are going to be the next target of the Ukrainians. Furthermore, probably the Ukrainians will try to advance, and they will try to complete the story of Starozhovo, trying to force the Russians to move their defense line below this red line that I'm trying to add to the map. So probably I expect that Starozhovo is going to fall also very soon, because the settlement is currently encircled by the Ukrainian force in Blagodatne. Probably it's not a very easy job to protect the settlement. Otherwise, from the other side, we remember that during the first phases of storming operation, the Ukrainians captured settlements during the daylight, and somewhere at night, the Russians usually returned control over every single settlement. So probably, and also the Russians do make another counter-offensive operation and to return control over every single settlement. We need to wait this night. We need to expect another 6-12 hours, and probably tomorrow we are going to understand the real picture in this area. And if the Russians are not going to return control, that means that the Ukrainians managed to establish their positions, and from now on this is their bridgehead that they will try to use for developing more offensive operation to the south. And basically also the settlements like Novodarivka and Rovnopol got into the crisis situation. Currently these settlements is under Ukrainian probably close observation, and probably the Russians will be forced to step back from these settlements either if the Ukrainians will continue doing the things that they're doing right now. So we'll see. Anyway, and this is not a crisis situation. There is nothing critical from this situation, because as you can see, currently the Russian forces are repelling and repulsing the Ukrainian attacks on the Vremivka tactical bridgehead, and the main defense belt goes much far to the south. So currently the Russians are not losing anything. Currently they're reducing the Ukrainian army without even battles along the main defense belt. So nothing critical has happened during the previous days. Now let's go to the Avdiivka and Marinka front lines. The Russians reported that they managed to repulse the Ukrainian attacks in the vicinity of Novobakhmutovka. The Ukrainians made at least 8 attempts to attack in the vicinity of Krasnogorovka, in the vicinity of Pervomaiska, and in the northern part of Marinka. The Russians reported that Ukrainians were attacking using the forces of 59th motorized brigade. We saw the video of clashes in the vicinity of Nivolska. Probably that was the forces of 59th motorized brigade. The Ukrainians were attacking the Russians using the forces of 79th air assault brigade, probably from the north, trying to push the Russians from the northern part and to restore supply road connection between Marinka and Krasnogorovka. And the Ukrainians were attacking the Russians using the forces of 110th brigade, probably in the vicinity in direction of Krasnogorovka and Novobakhmutovka. The Russians, as a response, destroyed the ammo depot in Lastachkina of 53rd mechanized brigade, and as you can see, during the previous 24 hours there were no attempts from the Ukrainian side to attack Vadiana and Opytna. Probably that was the reason of that Ukrainians just simply lost their munition for that offensive operation. Probably they got in order not to continue any advancing. When talking about Artyomovsk, there were no changes on the ground. We discussed that the Russians, as a result of counter-offensive operation, managed to push the Ukrainians back to these forest lines. probably the Ukrainians doing some kind of regrouping, but anyway, the Russians added that as a result of artillery attacks, they attacked positions of, they destroyed the ammo depot of 63rd Motorized Brigade in the vicinity of Ivanovska and the headquarters of 3rd Brigade. And I'll remind you, the 3rd Brigade is the brigade that recently have managed to develop their bridgehead along the channel, so probably the Russians just destroyed the officers and headquarters who was responsible for that operation. And when talking about serious bridgehead, the Russians reported they attacked and destroyed the headquarters of 10th Mountain Assault Brigade, and the Russians are saying that there was a meeting and they were around, and the Russians discovered the place where the Ukrainians were planning to make this meeting, and as a result of artillery attack, around 7 higher officers of that brigade was killed. So probably this is a very big loss on the local level, in particular of that 10th Mountain Assault Brigade. The Russians added that as a result of fierce fightings from, let's say, Marinka to Siversk, the Ukrainians lost 310 soldiers, 11 armored vehicles, including 2 tanks and 3 artillery systems. The level of loss on the Donetsk front line is the same as was yesterday, the day before yesterday, and 5 months ago. When talking about Kupiansk and Liman front lines, there are no changes on the ground. Nothing have changed. The local clashes in the vicinity of Kupiansk, the local clashes in the vicinity of Kremenная Forest, and the level of loss from the Ukrainian side probably is the lowest since the beginning of these operations on these 2 front lines. They lost just 80 soldiers and 8 armored vehicles. So the situation, as you can see, is stable. Nobody is going, or we're planning to start any offensive operation. The Ukrainians are making some kind of regroupings. They're moving their tanks from one front line to another, trying to force the Russians to do the same, but as you can see, they're not doing anything. And very interesting updates also are coming from Black Sea. Today, the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation reported that Russian ship Priazovye managed to repel attack of 6 Navy drones of the Ukrainian side, and they published the video of that, saying that the 6 drones were trying to attack the Russians. They made 2 waves. The first wave the Ukrainians made using 3 drones, and as soon as the Russians destroyed them, they reported about that to the mainland, and probably the Ukrainians thought that this, like the first wave, will reduce the Russian focus, and after that they made another attack from, let's say, from the north, and that attack was also repelled, and the drones were completely destroyed. The Russians are saying that during that operation they were trying to protect the pipelines that goes from Russia to Turkey, and there are 2 pipelines, the Turkish pipeline and the Blue pipeline, and both of them supply Europe and Turkey with gas from Russian Federation. So these 2 pipelines are very important for the Russians because they're able to get money for this, to support, and to pay for this special military operation. Anyway, the Russians also added that during that operation, all the time above the Black Sea, there was a global hawk from the United States of America, who was discovering and flying above the Black Sea, and probably using that drone, the Ukrainians were able to coordinate and to control the Navy drones who were attacking the Russian fleet. Anyway, we see that this is the second attempt from the Ukrainian side to destroy Russian ships in the open sea, not in the vicinity of the Crimea, but in the open sea. And this is a very big signal for the Russians, because till today the Russians were able to destroy the Ukrainian drones, but it's just a question of time probably, and it's just a question of chance. Anyway, sooner or later, if the Russians can't solve the situation with the United States drones above the Black Sea, anyway, sooner or later the Ukrainians will be able to get Russian ships. It's just the mathematics and just the theory of chances. Anyway, they do have these chances. And the difference is that when talking about United States of America, mainly they're trying to coordinate their attacks using the, let's say, AI, using the computer systems. And the Russians reported that those drones were destroyed by people, by just regular humans who were staying on the ship and using machine guns. They were shut down, those drones. You see the difference, and there is a very high chances that sooner or later the Russian troops and crew will make a mistake, and this will cost them a very big price. And to solve the issue with the drones, of course, the Russians need to solve the issue with the like global hawks and the United States presence above the Black Sea. I don't know how can they do this. Probably they are thinking about this, so we'll see whether they are able to do anything with this or not. Also, the Russians reported that as a result of air defense, they managed to destroy another Su-25 in the vicinity of Askorovka. And when talking about Kherson area, we saw the video of the Dnipro before and after the explosion, and basically, as you can see, this is the river before explosion and this is the river after explosion. The water goes down, the water goes out from this territory, and probably in a few days the Ukrainians will start having possibilities to organize some operation in this area as well, probably within the next 5 till 10 days. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.